All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order. If everybody wants to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, got first and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, is there any negative votes? All right, hearing none, motion carries. All right, number 4, public comments on agenda items only.
That guy.
So we had one person enter into a public comment, a gentleman by the name of Tom Payne, it looks like from Susquenita Township, but labeled no public comment or public comment sent, but at this time we have no email. So if he is participating via email or virtual, if he wants to send his comments in to us, we will reflect on those comments and do our best of answering those.
Right.
All right, moving on to discussion items. Review of the proposed budget 2022-2023 school year.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you for being here this evening for our special meeting and taking the time again in April for another meeting to really, again, take a closer look at our fiscal year plan for 2023 here on April 20th, 2022. So again, looking at our budget goals, and I apologize for my squeaky voice, have a little bit of allergies happening today. So our budget goals is we continue to enhance and maintain our current curriculum offerings for students. Number 2, we want to continue to maintain and enhance our facilities. And we want to work to provide a budget that is financially responsible. So these 3 tenets continue to be our bedrock as we continue to move forward with our budget plan together, collectively and cooperatively. Information to date, we still at this point do not have any information where the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's budget may lie, whether that be in terms of supporting an increase to basic ed subsidy or how they're going to continue to fund education and their commitment at this particular point. So we continue with this plan with numbers from 2022 as we plan for fiscal year 2023. We already reviewed our fund balance and our fund balance commitments. We continue to look at our financial trends throughout the remaining part of fiscal year 22, and we use those trends to help forecast our latest and continue to make updates to the fiscal year 23 plan. We have this particular special budget meeting and any additional meetings that you may want at your discretion. We'll provide an overview of our budget presentation in May, and we'll look for preliminary final budget approval at our May meeting. And our budget then will be available for public review for 28 days before final budget approval at the June meeting. Process steps to date, again, are fixed drivers, salaries and benefits, health care, PSERS contributions, special education services, and the rising cost of cyber charter and the unfair funding associated with that. I thank you for passing the cyber charter resolution that was sent and is now in the hands of the Pennsylvania School Boards Association, and they'll collectively send that as part of our collective advocacy for the unfair funding formula. We continue to review our maintenance plan and shape our facility needs and prioritize those needs accordingly. We passed and submitted the Act 1 resolution not to tax above the index. We did that in December. We approved the final audit report for fiscal year 21 at our March board meeting, and we analyzed and provide options for reduction in the overall budget deficit. And it's important to note that our fiscal year 23 budget is roughly 1.4%. Actually, it's a little less than 2%, total increase from fiscal year '22. And I want to pause for a minute there and actually think that that's pretty remarkable in and of itself. With the rising cost of everything that we're predicting, yet we are still only around less than 2%, probably around 1.9% increase from fiscal year '22 to '23, and still being able to maintain solid delivery of programs. Current expenditure report. Excuse me. We have a grand total of $36,377,163. You'll see the 100s breaking down is the salary component, the 200s, and this is going to play in important later on because these are the objects. The 200s will be the benefits, 300s professional services, 500s purchase services, 600 under supplies, 700s equipment, 800s in the other category, and our financial obligations are the 900s. That's our debt service. Current revenue, we are looking, projecting at $34,102,857. You'll see the pie breakdown category chart. Local revenue and state revenue are about almost the same. That's uncommon, and it's important to know that our state revenue is higher because of our contributions associated with Essers. And we'll get into the breakdown of Essers for fiscal year '22, fiscal year '23, and fiscal year '24 here in just one second. I'll pause. Are there any questions at this time? The budget comparisons, the difference between the orange and the black highlighted bar graph will show approximately the salaries between fiscal year '22, which is the black segment to your left, and the orange replicates the current fiscal year proposal. You'll see that in salaries, benefits, professional services, property services, purchase services, supplies, equipment, and those categories that we just described in the pie chart. This is just another look at it from a comparison point of view in a bar graph.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So it looks like the salaries, when you put it in that kind of pie chart, the salaries have increased, but your benefits have decreased over last year. Proportionately, wouldn't you think that those would increase in the same percentage or roughly the same proportional percentage comparatively, and why? Like, why is that so different?
That's a really great question, one that we've actually asked ourselves too as well. So looking at salaries, I think there's some philosophical approaches when you think in terms of how we budget for salaries, right? There are some approaches where you take a look at salaries and you just multiply it by what's in the collective bargaining agreement, which is 2.75%. We actually took a more, I would say, more detailed review and look at it. So every person, every position is a person, and every person has a movement across the collective bargaining agreement scale. So we took a look at what does the agreement say for '22, '23, where is that person, what is their impacted educational benefit, which could possibly move them going upwards on the scale, what's their projected movement upwards, years of experience, and then their education experience, which moves them across, and that gave a number. So that is what you're going to see why salaries are going to look a little different this year than you would in fiscal year '22. There is no added incentive or anything different. It's still by the collective bargaining agreement.
So is that simply just a projection, or is that based on the number of teachers that we know are currently taking professional development that could make that lateral? You know, where typically, professional upward would be based on,
Yes.
Years, but then do we also have a number of teachers that you're projecting that there's also going to be that lateral
Absolutely.
move?
All of those things were taken into consideration. Those that we know or have put in requests to take credits, those who we know are moving up because of years of experience, and those that we know we're projecting because they put in, as you had mentioned, their request for credit reimbursement or credit approval, and then they'll get reimbursed after they submit for credit approval.
And so they don't make the lateral move until after they've completed the credits?
Correct.
All right, and so we anticipate that those numbers will be achieved with those credit hours by the end of, or sometime during next fiscal year.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
And does that include non-bargaining unit staff and support staff?
Yes,
Act 93, everybody?
yes.
Yep.
Yep.
So it's not just bargaining unit making it go up?
Absolutely. Yep.
And when I saw that too, I wondered, and I didn't know if maybe it was because we were doing something different than we've done in the past. Like special ed, there's a 46.8% change in salary, but there's a negative 15.20% in benefits. Like, I thought maybe it was because we were doing it differently than we've done before, because some of these numbers are really like
Different.
very, very, special ed, it was $1,104,000 and, you know, increase, and a decrease in salaries, and a decrease of $221,000 in benefits. So is it, we're doing it maybe the budget differently?
Well, absolutely.
Okay, that's why I assumed.
Absolutely. I think you'll see that swings, you know, projected throughout. And I think this lends itself to, not to foreshadow, but one of the questions that's on the question and answer sheet is the unpacking of what the difficulty of it, because we are taking a look at the new cost object codes that we mentioned probably a lot of times, right? Through the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So it's taking those and different items that were once called a different function and object code are now placed somewhere else.
Okay.
So you'll see that a lot throughout, because there'll be blanks. Well, where did that go? No, it's in there. It's just, it's somewhere else inside of the budget. That's where it needs to be
So
based
in-
upon the charts of accounting.
In vocational ed, it's almost a 93% increase and a negative 10% decrease in benefit, the difference between benefits and salaries. So it's, that, what you just said makes sense.
And it's broken down a little bit. So when we look at vocational education, that is not our career and tech education, our CPCTC. Those are some teachers that we classify under the vocational educational component and category.
So moving forward, next year, if we saw this, we would not see this dramatic of a change because we have things ordered where they're supposed to be.
Should be able to very easily see apples to apples. And unfortunately, it looks like this year you're seeing an apple to a tangerine.
For sure.
And that's based on full employment, every position filled for the entire school year?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And we know that's not reality.
Yes, sir. And the benefits question is we took a look at each person's benefit
Sure.
obligation as well, too. Where are they? Are they coming in at single? Are they coming in at family? What is that movement? What are they projecting? So that also equates to that. Getting the best real-time data that we can.
So with that, is it safe that there potentially could be a change because somebody
Oh,
could
sure.
shift within that?
Without
And
a
that
doubt.
would that put us at risk that we are potentially under budgeting because the benefits are projected lower than what they were last year? That maybe somebody's coming in at single and they have a life-changing event and they could move to
That's a great
family.
question on anything inside of a budget. You make a really great point, because this budget is, excuse me, good thing there's a spot missing, this is a forecast right now, and it's so difficult to know where things may shift. So yeah, I mean, it could have a little bit of movement, but could have movement the other way too. Absolutely. Because
So-
life takes its changes in different
So when you forecast, do you
perspectives.
do for family, or do you do for single, or do you
We
take
try to
an
look at-
average of that or something?
We look at again, individual trend, where are they at?
Okay.
Like for the vacancies that you, if you.
Oh,
possibly
family.
fill a Family, so
Yes.
you're estimating on the high end.
Correct. Always estimate on the high end when it comes to vacancies. Yes, sir.
So then, is there anybody left that knows how we did the benefits in the past? Did we just do everybody that worked in the district family? Because this is a huge cut, and we're not saving money on benefits. Go ahead.
If I may, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to work on your budget with you. To answer that question directly, I looked at how the budget was prepared from two business managers back. So you had Mr. Roger Carl and then Mrs. Nikki Moore. And I looked at the change year over year, and it looked like a flat percentage was applied just to the existing number, just as Dr. Fox had stated, not only in salaries, but also in benefits. So early on, when we looked at these, just as Dr. Fox had said, we sat down with the payroll coordinator and the human resources director, and we went over almost line by line, employee by employee, looking at where people currently are in their benefit selection and in their salary, and projecting if they were moving over, if they were teachers, and projecting if they were likely going to change their family situation and their benefit selection. So we went that individual by individual. It took 3 days, and it was a fun exercise. But we were able then to take their placements, anticipate what their placements are going to, and then apply next year's rates for their benefits on that grid to next year. So that's a number crunchy kind of way to come up with these items. It does explain why the benefits went up for the salaries went up for those people who are projected to go up in salary, and it did narrow down the benefits portion because not everybody is going to, not everybody gets benefits, not everybody gets family benefits. So we were able to shave that number down
Appreciate
to
the
give
effort.
you, the board, the best estimation of where we're going to be next year.
Yeah, and that's great. So, but then on the other side, we took salaries to the maximum.
And again, not for absolutely everybody, because we looked at teachers definitely on the
No,
teacher
I
list.
understand that, but so I've been on the board for 13 years now, and we've never been staffed. So you took that to the maximum plus movement is what I'm asking. If we were fully staffed
For
and we had
positions.
moved, yes.
We,
So that's why there's such a big chunk, because before it was based off the previous year and there was a percentage added.
I think so.
Okay, thank you. That makes total sense to me, so.
So I believe last time, which is a great question that was asked, is what is the implication or application of Essers funding for fiscal year 23 and 24? So I wanted to put together a couple of charts that show, I think, some of the implications. And I apologize, I cut off the top of this to squeeze it onto this slide. But to the left-hand side, you'll see a description, and we'll go through this relatively quickly. The second column, and this should look relatively familiar because we did do a presentation on how we're going to apply the application of this is Essers 3 and fiscal year 23, and then some note area there. Salary and benefits for 3 school counselors. You'll see the comparative application for this year, application for fiscal year 24, salary and benefits for intervention specialist, supplemental pay for student services. A lot of that is we have a lot of work in the summer, school counselors, school nurses, intervention specialists, just a lot of work that needs to be done in the summer to prepare for students. And we can utilize some of this to be able to provide those current needs. Salary and benefits for 2 district psychologists. I do want to pause and just, there's a point I want to make real quick though too, is because they're in Essers for fiscal year 23 and 24, these are not additions to the budget. These are not additional people. This is some cost savings that we're going to experience for a couple years, and they already had been in the budget. They're not coming out of the budget, they're not new to the budget, and they're not additional positions. So this is just us getting a little bit of cost savings, shifting over. This would have been a salary. Well, that revenue source is now going to be filled by Essers.
But they are in the budget, and they are new because we did not fill them previously. We decided not to. They were not filled until we had the Essers money.
No, not the district psychologists.
No. All of these positions are not new. All these positions had been in the fiscal year 21, had been in fiscal year 22. These are all positions that had been in the budget prior. These are not new. What we're saying is we are going to utilize this funding to offset some of the costs that we, as a district, have experienced and be able to track easy, because there's tracking requirements with federal programs, this, by using that.
To see
Right.
that, because we did not fill a bunch of positions in 2019, 2020, because we decided not to.
No, but
And then they got filled because they got filled with Essers money in 2020.
I think the only one I know what you're saying, Phil, and there was like the nurse we didn't fill the social worker, but we always had 2 school psychologists, so they were always here. And we also had the counselors. We added a counselor. But my question though is kind of going back to what Phil brought up last week was,
What about 25?
and I'm gonna say you're right, Phil, which it's hard to roll that off my lips. But is my concern is that we're utilizing Essers 3 money for something that was a traditional budgetary item, and we've used budgetary, and we're still in a deficit, and that money's not going to be there forever. So we're going to have to move. We're going to have to allocate regular fund money for that district psychologist. So
In
what I'm
25.
saying is, in 2025, are we going to be in a jam because we don't have Essers money? Because we're using it for something that is normal budgetary stuff?
Great question. Fair question, and the honest answer, yeah. Absolutely. That is the honest answer. In 2025, we may be looking, coming down the pike, without any relief associated with cyber charter reduction, without any relief associated with basic ed funding, we may be staring down a bigger deficit. Absolutely. And that larger deficit could look very similar, very comparatively to fiscal year's 22 projected budget, which was $3 million, would be my, I almost used air quotes, prediction, if that's the right word. Sorry, I'm,
Do you have some top secret information that they're actually going to do something?
no.
Okay, so we're going to be short $3 or $4 million in 2025.
That's what it appears to be at this point,
Well, when does our debt service end, though?
2025.
So we wouldn't have debt service, but
Yeah. The problem I have with thinking about using our debt service to offset a budgetary shortfall is that when we do have a big ticket thing that we need to do in the future, where are we getting that money? Like, where will that come from? I would like to know that we could always use debt service to be earmarked for something that might be a big capital project, whatever that might look like in 2025. So that's just my thoughts.
I would absolutely agree with that, but that is, if we get into a pinch, that is an option that you have collectively and we have. Absolutely. But I would agree with that thinking too.
so which one of all those line items that you have up on the screen now, which ones of those
Are
would
new?
would go away if we don't have the funding for them? Would any of them?
Oh, sure. So absolutely, these are great questions. Let's go through. The roof repair we would probably, again, roof repair is essential for us to do as an ongoing, part of our ongoing plan to sustain and not have to fully replace, but to treat our roofs.
But you have the roof repair in separate numbers down at the bottom. So that's easy to see what it is.
But you're right, that could be removed and go into capital.
I mean, I understand why you did this. You pulled these things out because they're easy to be able to target and say, this is exactly what we use the money for that meets the criteria of Essers 3. So,
Correct.
Right, so I get what you did. Like, let's pull out the things that we know we can apply Essers 3 money to, that we can say, here's what we used it for.
So offsetting the total from 23 to 24, the budgetary offset of Essers 3 for 23 is $547,400. That's taking away the one-time cost of the roof repair of $466,000. Fiscal year 24, we would apply $751,349.
Where are the iPad leases in 2023?
iPad leases in 2023 are coming right up here to Essers 2 on the next slide.
Gotcha.
Yep. So we're going to apply $211,610.17 to fiscal year 22 this year. And we're looking at fiscal year 23 for Essers 2 iPad leases, our HVAC control project that we talked about, and we've started doing some of the work associated with that. Because that project came in under budget and what we were initially quoted, because they were able to reuse some of the controls and reprogram some of the controls, we're able to squeeze out, if you will, our flooring high school replacement, and a one-time cost of high school cafeteria furniture as well.
Can you click back to the Essers 3? Okay. So the Essers 3 is going into 2024 for
Yep.
the iPad lease. Essers 2 is doing 2022 and 2023?
Yep, so basically what we're going to see is 2022, 2023, and 2024 will have iPad leases by federal programs. Sure.
Back to the next slide now? Oh, it does, I thought it said 21, okay.
Yep.
What is iReady or equivalent?
iReady or learning equivalent would be an intuitive diagnostic program. So very much like IXL, basically you're taking a diagnostic computer-based adaptive program. It gives you a rating, if you will, tells you where you're at in terms of progress towards standards, and then gives you adaptive skill set enhancement activities to work on to build up some of those skills.
Okay.
And the last Essers, which I call Essers Bonus, but it's, I don't know if this is the name that's in the PDE application. It's called Essers 7%. There might be a better name for it, but that's just how we've been tracking it in the name. How and why that means 7%, I'm still not sure why, but anyway. Again, not sure.
Federal and tax increase.
Phew, making me nervous there. I'm like, Act 1 index. The 2023 commitments, supplemental after-school tutoring wages. We do tutoring programs already after school. We do that here at the high school. That's going to get gobbled up relatively quickly, but this is a cost deference. Same with transportation. Our after-school activity bus runs, this is an offsetting of that. Stipends for summer programs. Super excited about the summer programs this year we're offering, and we want to prepare to offer those in fiscal year 24 again, too. Same with supplies, being able to reuse some supplies and have supplies, some take-home opportunities. Social worker contracted services. Notice we said the word contracted service. Excuse me, contracted services end when the contract ends. So we're looking for a provider that can come in and provide this service for us, that we're not obligated to pay. They're not a part of our collective bargaining agreement or Act 93 agreement, and when the agreement ends, the contract will end with them. You'll see that there's nothing for 2023. And the reason there's nothing for 2023 is I'm super excited to say that Ms. Krista Snyder procured a grant for approximately $93,000 for social work services for one fiscal year through a partnership for Better Health, an organization for Central Pennsylvania, and was able to procure that. So what we thought we would only get social work services for a year, we believe we're able to get for 2, and we're still looking for other sources as well. So that is going to be huge for our district. We believe that's going to help through some of our truancy elimination. We believe that's going to help connect families and help take and alleviate some of the pressures that were put on administrators and counselors and teachers to help get some of that assistance that's needed to connect them to resources that we have here and resources within our county and community. Professional learning opportunities for teachers. So some of these are chiseled out that are required. This is a requirement, so this gives us $10,000 to be able to use for professional learning opportunities for staff and teachers. Reading, supplemental reading materials, that's exactly allows us for some supplies to be able to use at the middle school, elementary, and high school levels, and supplemental math intervention resources as well. And again, you'll see the total commitment for fiscal year 23 is $61,243, while in 2024, $90,392. Current budget deficit. $35,992,158 expenditures, revenue $34,102,857, and the deficit is still at $1.889643 million at this particular point. Here's one thing I do want to stress, and I think it's important to know because there's a lot of questions, and I think these are awesome and excellent questions, is anytime there's an open position, it doesn't matter if that position is an administrator, that position's a paraprofessional, if that position is an administrative assistant, or a member of our collective bargaining agreement, a teaching professional. What we do as a group and a team, it could involve Dr. Herman, Ms. Snyder, and it could involve, it will, if it's in the building, involve one of the principals. And what we do is we have a conversation. We have a conversation to say, if we do not fill that position, what's the impact on our students? What's the impact on our curriculum? And if we do not fill it, what does that look like, and what's the cost savings? We do that every time there's an opening. Some are easy, aren't they, guys? Where we can say, well, the impact is we don't have a program anymore, and that's a problem. Let's fill it. Others are, actually, it's a benefit not to right now, because what we're seeing, and this has happened, is the benefit is we have already some established teachers. Class size will not rock up too high, and it will still be balanced. And what we'll have is the continuity of two teachers who are veterans and have been here, and it won't be as disruptive as adding somebody midstream. That has occurred. So those things I want to stress that we do time and time again. It's an exercise that we've established and an exercise of fiscal responsibility and our prudence that we will continue to do. What we do with contractors too is we do our best to review every contract and try to do what we can to squeeze out the maximum benefit that we can out of those. That's fun. We also look at competitive pricing. We try to go back and say, is this the best that you can get? I know we've already done that just this week in and of itself, saying, is this the best price that you can offer us? I don't think it is. The second is we also look at cooperative pricing. There's sometimes in cooperative pricing, it gets a bad connotation, but a lot of times, a lot of the work is already done, and that cooperative pricing looks at the volume associated with it, and we can get some really good pricing out of cooperative pricing. And another thing, and I'll give Mr. Howell some kudos, he's watching his grandchildren play baseball right now in their first game, is preventive maintenance. Preventive maintenance is huge. Instead of waiting for something to completely break, we look at and we have service calls. We have an ongoing partnership. We inspect, we repair, we change filters, we do grease fittings. We make sure that things are upkept to the best of our ability. We make sure that drains are cleared. We make sure out here, again, that the water is going to be draining the way it needs to be properly. All those are essential to preventive maintenance.
I have a question. Can you go back to the slide before that? So is this so the expenditures, that's for our current fiscal year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So are you still?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is predicting for fiscal year 23.
That's for next.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, I got confused on.
Don't call me ma'am.
And,
Oh, that's just.
and the revenue number has Essers money in it.
Yes, it does.
And that has, okay.
Yep.
So that's fiscal year '23, though.
Yeah, so this is saying, anyway, so I'm confused.
So it's actually 23, it's not 22.
So it's fiscal year 22, 23, not,
The current budget for next year as of right now.
Today.
Yeah, don't let April. Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
My fault. Yep.
So,
No, it's tough because we were actually, and I just want to pause and say that because it was last meeting, in March's meeting, right? We were operating on 21 when we were talking about audit. We were looking at fund balance for 22, and we were doing budget for 23. Now, wonder there's a lot of years being mixed up. Absolutely. And that doesn't help when I.
so what is the total Essers money in 23? And you can't just go to one of those slides because you have to add, so you don't have it all added all together. Can you just get us that information? You don't have to sit here and add them up now.
If someone
But
else
if we could
wants to
have it for
talk a
23,
second.
24, 25.
Making stuff up now.
If you'll allow me, I will do that for you, and we'll show you that functionality a little bit later, but each board member will have the opportunity to show themselves in a self-serving kind of way how to do that with the Google Sheets that Mrs. Matash and Mrs. Balsbaugh has allowed us to put together. So I'll pull that number together for you.
So
Okay.
that number is 1,150,019.65. So let's just take it $1.1 million, roughly.
So go to the next slide then,
Sure.
or the previous one. One too many, that one.
So 3 million,
So it'll be $3 million,
which is what,
Without Essers.
which is what would,
which is what he said it has been historically, what
Yep.
our budget was.
yeah.
And I don't know if you mentioned this before I got here, and I apologize if you did. Have we gotten the state funding? Do we know that number yet? We don't know that number. Okay.
Nothing's been sent to the.
But I do want to state, let's take out the 466,000 one-time a cost,
Participating level fund.
because that could come out of capital, which wouldn't impact your budget, our budget, not your
That
budget, our
can't be in that
budget.
1.1 number because you were at 1.1 on that slide already.
What?
If you had that 400,000 in it, go back one, yeah. You're almost 1.1 right there.
But it says minus 547.
What's
That's, so that's what it really is,
The 547,
the 547.
correct. Oh, I see.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're right. It was 1.1.
Because if you go back through
Yep,
all the slides
yep,
of Essers money, we're still at
Yep.
1.1.
My math.
Okay.
Yep, fair. So yes, about $3 million.
I know, I'm right again.
I think we should,
You have to send an email to my wife now.
all right. So our next steps, May caucus budget presentation. We'll look through some of the questions here in just a couple of minutes that were entered, which are excellent questions. We'll look at May preliminary final budget approval at the board meeting, and public review for 28 days, and final approval at the June board meeting. I think it's important to note that our preliminary final budget approval, it could change between preliminary final and final. So if we get new information, some information and any information as to where we are at with the Commonwealth, or even with the federal assistance. And we say federal assistance, there could be some federal money in terms of funding IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Remember, that is underfunded as well. When IDEA first came into law, it was supposed to be funded, I believe, at 20%. It has not gotten to 20% funding. I believe the closest that it's been was about 13. And I want to say right now, and I want to say we're about 11, 12. So again, I think that would be extremely helpful.
Do you really think, if you were a betting man, that there is any funding coming out of Washington? I'm going to say there's zero till after the election.
Are you suggesting that they would do an unfunded mandate?
Never.
Or have already?
No, I actually think
I,
it might be because of the election.
Sir, one thing I don't do is bet on those types of things.
We might not even have a budget for the state in November. That's a fair possibility right now. I mean, has anybody even seen Governor Wolf other than the kids at Cumberland Valley?
Yeah, yeah. From what I understand, a lot of them saw today. Everybody was mistaking my
Very
Governor
inside
Wolf
joke.
on the students down at Cumberland Valley.
Really?
I don't see it like that.
So I think at this time, let's transition a little bit into some of the budget questions, and we'll go through these kind of subject area line by line, which are great. First, thank you for taking a look at it. And again, I want to, I think, just pause for a second and state that I know how difficult it is to take a look sometimes at it and say, wait a minute, why are these blanks in existence? Where did this go? Well, it didn't necessarily just disappear. It went into another category, and I think that's the difficulty sometimes with it. But let's go through these. Then we're going to showcase a little bit of some, I would say, an intuitive document that allows for some fun to be able to drill down into some school, you can go by department, you can go by function and salary. I tell you what, I had some fun with it just a little while ago myself. So it really allows for some pretty neat and intuitive features. First grade teachers, and line number 21, the question came out is, why is this a 317,000 increase from previous fiscal year? That grouped up number was 2 million, a little over 2 million. And the short answer of that is, that was one of those numbers that was grouped up in there. So if we unpack that number, that designates all elementary regular education teachers in that account code. So that's one of those that we say that it's truncated up there, if that's the right word to use, or grouped up, and it needs to umbrella down. And we're working on all of that as well too. And it's been an exercise of movements, because again, it's not just building a budget, it's now building a budget and moving into the new account codes. And that's been a good exercise for Mr. Medina, Mr. Bard, and I've learned a little bit about functions, objects, and codes myself as well.
So if I understand you unmute myself. So if I understand you correctly, things aren't supposed to be all grossed together like that. It should be, every single thing is going to have its own separate line. So, correct?
To a certain extent, yes. So in some of those large group categories, we might have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 12 people. If you're looking at salary lines or benefit lines, that let's just say kindergarten teachers or whatever, they have a very specific code for teachers for object. It might be 120, right? And in their benefits, there's several different object codes for benefits. You have health, dental, vision, life, PSERS, Social Security, so all those things. So when we went through the analysis to look at specific people and specific categories,
Thank you.
a lot of people were grouped up in order to give the board, in the limited time available, the most accurate estimate of what our total spend was going to be for salaries and benefits. We grouped a lot of things up. When the budget is finalized and that final dollar amount is done, those categories will be flushed out in each individual line. What's likely not going to change, though, very much, are the total combinations for regular instruction salaries, special ed instruction salaries, special ed instruction benefits, those kind of things. So it is the minutia of divvying those things out into the various dimensions.
So if it's spread out by, so if the end goal is going to be that salaries are spread out by like teachers, like first grade, second grade, are benefits also then spread out by first grade dental, first grade vision, first grade, you know, health? So we should see it to that minutia of, it's not going to be, here's dental, vision, health, and it's all lumped together based by elementary school like it was before.
Right.
Like I should see it to that level of detail.
We do. I know we do. And if you'll allow me, Dr. Fox, Mrs. Matash, if you could go to the account dimension tables tab. Okay, so, and scroll up just a little bit, please. All the way to the top if you could. So our account dimension codes right there under notes for users in the left-hand column, you see that the account code structure is listed there, okay? And it gives all those various dimensions. So in each of those dimensions, like you are used to seeing the function as 1100 for regular ed, and then moving over, the object is 200. So when we put the budget together in our accounting system, they're likely going to be over more than 2,500 lines. So we will see those, but when the board gets its monthly reports, you see that those account functions kind of rolled up into, I call them middle functions. So instead of seeing only the 200s or each individual thing in the, life insurance, dental insurance, you see them kind of rolled up into grouped dimension codes, which show in this spreadsheet. So the board members have access to this particular thing. And Mrs. Matash, just for example, if you could click on the hot link for object codes in column C. So board members, you can do this too. If you click on there and then click on that dimension, you'll see the table for all the various different object dimensions that we use in our accounting system. It's very, very well divided out. And so this is something that we are living with in our school district chart of accounts. If you go back to the top, yeah, and just click you might be at the top. So the answer to your question is board members can see that as far down divided as they would like to see. And sometimes you can get lost in the weeds if, for example, the wrong account codes were used in previous years. I don't want to say the wrong account codes, but if they are not properly divided out into the right object codes, that's where the year-to-year comparison gets a little cumbersome. But for the most part, the object codes in the grouped functions, the 100s, the 200s, the 300s, those things are essentially the same. One big difference, however, I do want to make sure everybody understands, one big difference for that is energy was previously in the 400s, and it should have been in the 600s. So that's one big thing that you'll see. Oh, okay.
While we're
Mrs.
taking a
Matash,
tour,
if you go back to that previous tab, I forgot to mention this to the board.
this is a neat feature here.
Go back to the, yeah, that one, yes, preliminary budget. And then if you go all the way to the top, board members, this is, just want to open Pandora's box here a little bit. If you click on that chart of accounts, board members do have access to this. So this is the 153-page document from the PDE that shows what our school district various charts of accounts should be following. So that's what we're in the process of moving into this year. So you can see that, but that link there where it says account dimensions at the bottom that we just showed you, it's kind of our cheat sheet to make things a little bit more reasonable for board members and operators to use. Now, Mrs. Matash, if we go back to yes. So this is the most updated information that we have. Things were changing up until even today, So what this will allow the board members
This
to
is
do,
fun.
and I do, thank you for letting me play with the budget because I really do like this. So, for instance, this is our entire budget, preliminary budget for next year, our proposed budget. You can see that the total in the box in column E is $35,992,157. As Mrs. Matash is showing, there's all the line budgets that you see. So in the tab that you previously were viewing, where you posed all these questions, many of these account numbers are the same, some of them are different, and the line items, the line number may be different from what you were used to seeing in the previous tab. Things had to be renumbered in order to make it functional. However, if we go to the top slicer where it says mid-function, next one over, yes, mid-function, click clear and then select 1100, which is regular education. Use the little scroll bar on the right to, nope, you have to do that again, I'm sorry. This is a good exercise. Click clear, and then the bar all the way, yep, and then click on OK. And then go to, now you can see a filter has been applied. Now, still at the top, Mrs. Matash, yes, major object, clear all, select 100 for salaries, click OK. And now, this is the number that you board members are used to seeing. When you see the function object combinations for regular instruction salaries, this is the number that you see. You see a grossed up number, 6.354 million. And included in this filter are now all the proposed budget lines, some of which were blank, some of them had funding in last year, some of them are grossed up. But the dollar amount is essentially equal to what we are estimating is going to be the net spend for regular instruction salaries for next year. Column D, Mrs. Matash, major object, if you would please deselect 1 and select 200. And click on OK. Board members, you can do this at your leisure too. Now you can see this is all the lines and the total attributed to salaries, I'm sorry, benefits. So included in here would be lines for PESers, Social Security, dental, medical, prescription, et cetera. And the nice thing about this is, not only is this what the board is used to seeing, but Mrs. Balsbaugh has updated, we'll call them function and object sheets for the board that were included in your original budget book, your original budget binder. And you can use that budget binder as a viewer, as a tool to help you select these combinations of function and object. So you can see these totals that are accurately reflected in your updated sheets. So this will help you answer those questions. One other thing I wanted to say is you can also now look at the drop-down for building.
Conference ones that we were, like a training.
And if you understand the codes, you might know that our code for 200 is the elementary school, our code for 500 is the middle school, and our code for 800 is the high school. So if you click on the high school, 800, and click on OK, so that is the total net spend for all functions attributed to the high school. Now, if you click on that, Mrs. Matash, and then select 100, or actually select 600, that's fun. So 600 is for supplies, and that would be next year's high school supplies allocation in the budget, $366,670. So that's a way for people to apply the filters and, you know, answer those 3 o'clock in the morning questions. And if you need some more assistance, you know, we can certainly use this tool to answer questions.
In the morning, is that right?
I see a filter for funding source.
Because you're not going to be here, so.
I see a,
Dr. Fox has my phone number, so.
I see a button for funding source, but is there a column for that?
The columns are hidden. Great question. So, Mrs. Matash, if you clear all,
Can I ask a question quick?
yeah.
Is green positive and red's negative?
Well, that's another good question.
Green means
Positive
you're saving
because
money.
it's a
Red means
reduction in
you're spending
cost,
more.
right? And a red is an increase in cost. So excellent catch. Excellent.
So opposite of everything else we do in the world,
Opposite.
like
Re-
green
reverse
lights, red
psychology.
lights.
Yes.
No, not in the finance world.
Yes.
Not in the finance world.
So so here we are in funding source. If you would select 989, and the cheat sheet that we were provided will show that this is Sr2. So this is our Sr2 allocation as of the latest proposed update from our curriculum instruction assistant superintendent. So we use these numbers that are reflected in the, I guess, the information that we submitted to the PDE to update our ESSER grants. So these are the most current up-to-date totals, and you can see if any of those are allocated to a specific function or a specific object by playing around with those filters. But
Yeah. Can you unhide that column so we can see it? The funding. Just
funding
'cause-
source? I have it locked down.
Not now, but just at some point. So, I mean, when we're looking at it, it makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm not.
You said it was hidden, so we
Well,
can't see it.
The thing that's hidden is just the funding source number. So you see the, yeah, right. Otherwise, you'd have 13 columns all the way wide. So all I did was I selected that particular portion of the funding of the account code, which is the funding source code, and made a filter out of it so that you wouldn't have to see all the funding source codes all the time. So the filter's there.
So is there anywhere to add the names to the code so that we know what they are without having to look at the other sheet?
I could. Let me try to do that for you, but the account dimension tab is there to maybe provide guidance for that particular thing. Otherwise, we'd have to include all the verbiage for all the things. Yeah.
Thank you for constructing that. I think I like the intuitiveness of it because you can drill down. I like we will be able to kind of go to something quickly and see it and look at it from a categorical perspective instead of 2,400 lines of fund. Now we're able to kind of group things together. But let's go back to some question and answer time if we can. Thank you for showcasing that. I think it's a great tool that we may even go to during the course of this to try to see if we have any additional questions as we move forward. Middle school, fifth grade, and sixth grade benefits. The question is, it seems as though those are segregated and that there's a section of middle school language, middle school math, middle school science, and others. Why are these teachers being calculated and have a consistency salaries? Grades 7 and 8 are listed by department within the context of this. So we broke 7 and 8th grade down by department. So it's 7 ELA, 7 math. And a lot of that is because of the PA charts of accounts, and they become middle school, high school subject code names. So we are just tracking them appropriately as we move forward with the charts of accounts. So they're still going to be labeled. When you break down that long code, you'll see the 500 still going to be attributed to, it'll say like MS, ELA, and you'll see the code number will be, I like code numbers, 500, that will be middle school.
So if I understand correctly, they'll get coded in with the language, because in 5th and 6th grade, we have English language arts, math, and science. So if I'm understanding what you're just saying, is those will then get coded in with the English language arts? Or
5th and
no?
6th will be separate because they're not, when it breaks down high school and middle school, according to the PA charts of accounts, are considered to be 7 through 12.
Okay.
We break down so 5 and 6 is going to be separate, and K to 4 is separate. So it looks at it as 3 different categories.
But it's basically because our 5th and 6th grade get classified in with elementary school.
That's a correct statement.
7th and 8th grade are considered
Yep.
in with high school, which was answered in one of my other questions as to
Yep.
which cyber charter.
Yep, absolutely. Sports leadership trips, what are these? And there's an increase in $1,000 over last year. These trips, there's 3 trips that they take. 2 are for sports leadership, and 1 is for adaptive PE. And these are combined, so that includes fees, substitutes, it also includes transportation. And actually, that's going to be adjusted to $2,405, not $2,865. But there is an increase from last year, and these trips provide that opportunity to go off campus. I think there was a corn maze at one particular time that they take students to. But just an experience, a leadership, it gives them an opportunity to take some of the theory in class and apply it to off-campus-based learning, and the adaptive physical education class to go off campus as well. And they've been extremely positive. Line 600 and 601, charter school, a budgeted decrease from elementary from $1 million and increase for high school. So basically that is middle school included with the high school numbers? And the answer is yes, it is. Again, elementary school is listed K to 6 and secondary 7 to 12 when it looks at cyber charter costs. Art supplies, there's a $6,000 or $5,000 increase. That's a good question, and one that's going to be modified because it should not be $6,000. It's going to be $3,600 in this particular area. So whoever put that question on there, thank you. It's a good catch and one that will be modified. Moving along to copy paper. Why an increase in copy paper, knowing that there is a skid of paper in the middle school and limited storage space? Absolutely, there's a limited storage space everywhere, but we don't just buy in bulk. The reason why we did purchase some additional paper this year early on is we were projecting that paper was going to be increased and in short supply. So, quick thinking on our part, let's purchase some paper now. We do have some room, or made room, I would say, not really great storage space, but we made room for what we can. We didn't want to run out of that supply from what we were hearing from our providers. So we purchase it as needed and what we anticipate it based on our supply. We don't just over-purchase for a year. So I don't know if that particularly answered that question. question number 617, Guernsey. Let me first by stating that's a categorical description that I think in the future we need to change. Guernsey is a provider. We don't list providers in our budget. That I think has been a placeholder over time. What we do is it should say supplies. And basically what we do is we look for the best provider for that supply that we can and the most cost-effective supplier that we can. And sometimes it can be Guernsey. Sometimes it can be another provider. And we have an excellent administrative assistant staff, and purchasing staff, and who looks for the best price that we can get.
So what is that line?
617.
What is it?
Oh,
If it's not Guernsey.
it should say supplies, and that would be middle school supplies. Yeah, so that name's gonna be changed in the future,
I think that would make more sense versus.
being allocated to just one provider.
One
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. Sorry, my voice keeps, ooh. 618, miscellaneous coding, hardware and robots. That's gonna be removed. That was a redundancy from previous years that does not need to and should not be there and has been removed. And you'll see that when in the report that Mr. Medina just kind of took us on a test drive of. So that's no longer there. 624, ukuleles and cart. Is this a wrong description? Did we purchase this year? We purchased all new ukuleles for the middle school last year. They're doing an excellent, they utilize them. There's a cart for them as well. We put in $200 to ensure that these purchases are upkept, that if you break a string or they get a hole, if that's even a thing, they get repaired. So repairs of ukuleles. Do they get holes? Oh, probably a bit. Whew. Supplies including copy paper. Besides copy paper, what's included in this? That's a really great question. This is going to be supplies for teachers in the high school budget as well as paper copy for the high school. So line 636 includes supplies for teachers as well as paper copy for the high school.
So don't each of the departments have their own supply budget? If I remember from previous years, that the departments have, or did that get removed? Okay.
Yeah, that's not, I don't believe that that's the case. We can filter down by, now when our,
So here I'm looking at math, general supplies, science supplies, general supplies, social studies. So is that just for the department? That's not for the teachers? So that's lines 640, 641, 642. So it's general supplies, social studies. There's supplies, other, which was another one that I questioned, that was art, health. There's English department supplies. So I'm just, that appears to be a redundancy then, to me. Because we're budgeting almost 2,000 for English department supplies, 1,500 for math general supplies, 9,000, roughly 9,000 for science supplies. So is this something different for the teachers?
Sorry for that delay. What we did when we sat down with the cost center managers is the cost center managers, we'll call them principals, and the directors of curriculum, technology, they went over their initial requests in October and November with their staff and provided a listing of budgetary requests. So we took, and you can point the finger at me, we took their individual items and had to code them individually so that they would have an opportunity to edit those in the future for dollar amounts, just as you're seeing here. I am not certain to what degree there is redundancy in those particular items, so I'm not really sure how to answer your question.
I'm taking a quick look at the functionality of that document that we just showcased and highlighted a second ago. And it appears that we did break those down in accordance and by department. So that number, when added up in its totality, should reach that number. So it is broken down by departments. So if we were to go into the cost center, and we could do that right now if we wanted to and have some fun and take a drive on it.
Well, it's actually, I mean, actually what's broken down by department is in excess of what is in 636. So what's broken down by department is probably 9, 10, 12, 13 and a half, as opposed to on 636, it's only roughly 8,500. So when you put those two together, that's over 20,000. So I'm just asking because it's like are we double budgeting for that? And so that's what I'm just asking. Like as we're breaking this out.
Absolutely, great question. So when we drill it down here under, yep, cost center manager's fine. We can actually just kind of roll through the high school here really quick. You won't see that redundancy in this report.
Okay, so that's been removed?
Absolutely. And
Okay.
that's a really great question. What supplies,
Are you-
including copy paper, is in there?
Yes, are you looking,
633.
if you're looking at just supplies,
So there says English department supplies, 636.
so,
Math general supplies, 637, but we still have 633
Yep.
as,
So that is in there.
I
We will take another look at that one and
Okay.
see and unpack that a little bit and see what that is. Now, when I take a look at, give me 1 second.
and I mean, I'm fine with it. You're saying that the teachers and the departments need supplies, but
Could be.
what I'm questioning is that,
be.
like, are we double budgeting for something and where should it be budgeted?
Yeah, we'll take a closer look at that to make sure that it's not being accounted for twice in there, that number is a real,
Right,
that number is reflective of a need versus being replicated twice.
Right. And I
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think I can answer that. Those filters that you have, again, we have, I'll say, 8 different dimensions, including subject, right? So what you don't see on this sheet, because Google is a little bit more limited than Excel, which is something that we can divvy those things out in a little bit more detail. So if you're looking specifically at the high school, is that what I'm hearing? Just regular instruction, high school, and supplies. So that's 610. So just give me. I'm in my Excel sheet, so I want to be able to give you the answer that you're looking for, which is maybe a little bit deeper than what that sheet allows you to do. So I'm just going to look at.
Listen, I don't have that. I just have to scroll on my sheet. It's all changed.
And you're looking at math? Is that what you're looking for? But for what subject was she looking at?
It was line 633. We were looking at general supplies, I think it was, including copy paper, and it was like 8,407.
Yeah, it's 8,410, but then
There's other
there's other categories where it's broken out. And so, like I said, I'm not nitpicking.
No,
I mean, it
you're-
sounds like I'm nitpicking.
No, the
but
big,
I'm just
the-
asking.
the good question is,
Come on, guys, like-
are we making sure that we're not adding things in multiple times?
Right.
That's the question, and what we will say is we're going to continue to take another good look and make sure it is not.
And I will say that I can narrow the filters down a little bit better than you can in this functionality here. We can certainly look at adding that in. But if we're looking strictly at regular instruction, supplies in the high school, for all subjects, the total is $52,202. If you're looking at very specific subjects, we can certainly show that supplies for art and health and music together is $15,575. General supplies for social studies is $1,021. General supplies for science, $8,920. department, $1,931. And general supplies for all other subjects, $22,355 for the high school year-wide. So there is not a large amount of redundancy if that's what you're looking for. And I can,
Well, right, and if it said general supplies, but it said it was supplies for the high school teachers, but it's all broken out into each of those categories, then what is the general supplies actually for, is what I'm saying.
Mr. Manager, it's a
That's
good
all
question.
I'm asking. Like, I mean, because most of those individual supplies, it was a reduction from last fiscal year, and I'm fine with that. But when you give me that the description for the general supplies is for the teachers, but each of the teachers and departments have their own supply budget, why, right, like just,
Yeah, that's my first inclination, but I want to be 100%
Right.
sure in the accuracy of that answer. So line 633, we will take a 636
well,
previously,
636 on mine,
633
but I
on
don't know
the
what on the new thing.
intuitive document, we'll call it. Yes. Excellent questions. Because again, we just want to make sure that, and I think this is a valid, exercise just to make sure, because there's a lot of lines and a lot of information, that there's just not things in there being redundant because of the way things have changed. And we've taken a multitude of different looks at this, but again, it's kind of like I look at something over and over again too, and it looks really great after you proofread something, and then all of a sudden I hit send and I have 4 misspellings, and I never, especially with me when it comes to dates, if I put like Wednesday, April something, and all of a sudden I send it out, I'm like, that was Thursday. I looked at this 10 times and 7 different people, and I still sent it out. So I think this is good. Anytime we could take a look at something and just make sure, there's nothing wrong with it at all. So thank you. So moving, if it's okay, let's, supplies other, general art, health, music, and physical education. An increase of 15,000. What does this include? This is one of those compressed columns with 4 special classes across high school into one category using this appropriate code. So yeah, that's a really great question too as well. 3rd grade teaching supplies, there's an increase by 12.6. And that's an excellent question as well. And this is where the foundation's supplies went into this particular school year. Yep. Excuse me. Nope, that's excellent as well. 649, elementary school art supplies. This is a kind of one of those, like, oh my gosh, where did this come from too? And we looked at it, and what are we buying that costs this much is exactly the question. So it's really a description change, and it should be other elementary school. So we're going to go in and make that description change in there. It should not say elementary school art supplies. It should say elementary school other or something along those lines, because it includes, there's not a code specific for it. It includes STEM supplies, general supplies from Amazon, Make-A-Do, color paper, ink for printers, and laminating film, not for art class.
So the one question I have about that is that there is another line item for elementary school for STEM supplies. And so should that be, it is line 656 on my stationery, on the non-intuitive or whatever. It's 656 and it says it's elementary school STEM supplies, and it was 3,000, so it was actually reduced from last year.
3,000 is a general, it's 3,000, we just leave that in there all the time.
Okay.
And that's what Sarah Bear uses for just general, consumable things in her STEM program. So
Okay.
depending on what she's doing next year, because Sarah always comes up with some crazy idea mid-year that she wants to try, which is awesome, as STEM changes. So that's just a general, she usually buys stuff from Amazon, to be honest with you. The other stuff includes, if I'm looking at this right, it's like the paper, it's a lot of, it's white paper, it's color paper, it's ink cartridges and toner, it's
So wouldn't the color paper go in line 650 where it says copy paper, color, and fadeless? Yes, that is elementary. That's line 650.
So I don't know, we might want to look at that, Dr. Fox, because I'm not sure exactly what was put into that number from what I have here.
Because you have a line 650, which is copy paper, color, and fadeless, 651, which is copy paper, white, then,
Honestly, I'm not sure what is in that line item.
So I think this is really,
That copy paper was for the office.
thank you.
Paul, I don't have a microphone, but that copy paper was for the office specifically, I remember that directly,
okay.
from our review. Thank you.
649 says art supplies. And it says 21.7. I can tell you right now, I didn't ask for 21.7 art supplies, so.
No, and
No,
we
no.
know that, and the elementary school, no.
Yeah.
It is not our, and we've already identified that that is not the case. Here is something, again, just kind of foreshadowing of an area, as we go through this exercise, and I go through this exercise as the first time, kind of directing a budget too, and leading a budget, one of the things we're going to do as a collective team, and I think it's fair to say, is since these are new categories as well for all of us to use, we're going to align a different mechanism and spreadsheet to share. So when it comes time for us to take what was there from every department and every building and every area, it kind of aligns a little easier and allows for the unpacking and grouping of things to align a little easier too. Because, again, these are the things, and I've done this before, I still do it. Like, here's a list of things we need. Now, tell me where it goes, right? And where it goes may not have that full explanation of what it is. So we want to make sure it all aligns together. So yeah, we'll take a closer look at what that is, but it appears, Mr. Bard, right, that it's copier paper for the office, some supplies for the office, but we'll take a closer look at line number 649 from the stationery document.
So Dr. Lorfink, is it possible that it is art supplies for art, but there was an extra zero added?
Banger has $3,600 budgeted for next year for all of her art supplies for every student at school. And that's including the increased kit clay amount that I had put in earlier.
But I don't see a line for that anywhere. Where? No, that was for a different, that was middle school. That was,
That's what I'm saying, I'm not sure what that I'm not sure what that is, and it says it was 19.6 the year before, but last year, we had budgeted 2,075.
yes. And that's why I was like, did somebody just add an extra zero when they were typing it in and they meant to put 21.7, like 2,100, like, but.
Dr. Fox, according to my notes, that the elementary budget that we spoke of earlier, that we received from Mrs. Moore in January, on that elementary budget line, there are budget lines 91 through 103, and they total $21,700, which is the information that we put in here on a line with a note specifically regarding this particular question. So you can't see that on your sheet, but in the larger sheet that I have with finer detail, I've been able to pull that up. So while you're discussing that, I will pull up the elementary school originally submitted budget, pre-preliminary budget. Okay.
If that's the case, those line items refer to my spreadsheet, that 90 whatever to 103.
91
And
to
that does
1.
include that $3,000 for general STEM supplies, so that is no budget. So that's no, we need to correct.
So then was it just supposed to be that was that was supposed to be the number that was the grossed up number that was supposed to be broken out, and the broken out number wasn't put in place of where that grossed up number was? Possibly.
So, absolutely,
Is what
that could be a possibility that we will definitely take a look at, and I will use the.
I mean, the kids will be having a lot of great art projects if they're getting 21, like, I won't tell her, That was a lot of clay that I was like calculating like how much clay they were. I was like, wow, they're going to be making a lot of great projects for the Youth Art Day next year. Yeah.
So I'm going to pause just for 1 second and write something down before I forget. So 793? 79, line 793, Title II teachers. This is a mix of Title I and Title II and will be broken apart from our federal programs discussion that we had and will be updated and will reflect line 795. So it's important to know that that number does not, that 207,778 is a combination of Title I, Title II, and it is not, it is, we get in terms of Title II approximately $50,000, not 207,000. Now, if the federal government does want to allocate 207,000 in Title II, we will not be disappointed by that. But again, it is when we're working and grouping and remake, there's a lot of work that went into, into this to get it to where it's at. And now it's just refining it and moving. It's important to know, though, that all of this information, a lot of it, it's unpacking, and we're making sure, like you said, some things are not in there twice, but in terms of salaries and benefits, it's not. So it's just moving them in the right categorical columns. Excuse me, what is 26, 23, 20, line 796? This is Title IV funds, and we use that to supplement the STEM teacher salary.
It didn't have a description.
It did not.
I had no.
Good question. Grossed up numbers to be divided 853 to 855. The dental benefits are actually, when we add up those columns, the charts of accounts, they're dental benefits for life skills teachers at the middle school.
Okay, and I think that's where, like I had said to you, maybe they weren't all broken out, but what I could see so far, it was like, wait, this only adds up to like 2,000, but we're saying it's 13,000. Like what? Not realizing there was a lot more missing.
Yep. Uh, 888, that's a learning support supplies for 2 classrooms at the elementary school. And 1029 is salaries for special education support staff at the district office. And again, they just didn't have descriptions at the time that we built that. So that's really good questions as well. 1152 is an awesome question. High school gifted program teacher. And that question actually identified something that we needed to split. It didn't, that money or the allocation didn't change, how it's being, what function or area that it's going to go into. So when we were building this at the time, we actually had a transition of teachers and how we were coding for the gifted program. And at this time, we have 1 gifted teacher. So that number is going to reflect 65,000, not 118,000.
Wow, a lot of money as a gifted teacher. Career.
Charter school tuition. This is special education students and regular education student tuition rates differ and they're tracked differently.
Okay.
Classroom tables and chairs, middle school. This was an area that we had previously, but I'd like to keep this area in the budget. And the reason I'd like to keep this area in the budget and maybe just reclassify the naming is because I'd like to see us start a process in the media center to upgrade some of the tables and some of the furniture that's in the media center at the middle school. We've done some work at the elementary school. We've done some work at the high school. Now, it's kind of like being a middle kid. I hope my parents aren't listening. It's time to do some work at the media center in the middle school as well. And 4,400 doesn't get us a lot of traction at all, especially when it comes to furniture, unfortunately, but gets us a little bit. In 1519, professional development, supporting professional development for school counselors at the high school, and it includes any of the dues and fees that they may have. 1713, substitutes. We have this covered earlier in items. Yep, agreed, it's been removed. Forum rental, really, we could change the name to forum rental to graduation rental, because it is $3,000 and we do have it in the budget. Renovations will be complete in 2020, will be complete this current year and be available for use in 2023. And that gives us an option if we want to, and it gives us an option if we don't want to. And if we don't want to, that $3,000 can be used for stage, can be used for other things necessary for graduation, I believe.
When's the form scheduled to be completed, 2023?
Right.
Yeah, available for use in
Available for use.
2023. I think it's going to be completed before that, actually, but available for graduations at that time.
Okay.
Now, the date may not align with what we need, so,
Yeah.
and we may not want to either, so that can be a discussion that we have.
So is the thought that that wouldn't be used if we're renting the tent to do it at the school?
That line, form rental, my budget is form rental / graduation costs. So that'll be used like this year to pay for the stage, chair rentals, things like that. So it could be here or tomorrow.
Or the, okay,
So that money's going to be used one way or another.
okay.
Yep. Just the naming of itself in that category lend itself to, if we don't go for them, then we don't use the money. We'll use the money.
Like you work for the government now.
Discipline slips. Let's not have any discipline, and we don't need any slips. Moving on. No. Those slips are used primarily, our bus drivers, because they don't necessarily have opportunity to get onto an iPad device. Or,
I checked that, that's my line item, that's, the discipline slips, the elementary.
right.
I don't think that doesn't include the bus ones, that's the high five discipline slips.
Oh.
These are tied to our PBIS program,
Okay.
they're a little different. I don't know where the bus ones are budgeted, to be honest with you, I don't know. They just show up, they haven't been running, we haven't rented new ones in 14 years, I've never heard of them.
So what I'm hearing is that we have enough supply that we probably don't order them. That's why.
That's because we never have any discipline problems on the bus, right?
I think they come out of the business office supply because I oversee the transportation department.
So there's your duplicate high five.
They're the ones, and we use the paper ones because a 5-year-old taking, if I'm 5 and I'm getting in trouble, I'm running you up and it goes in the computer, it's something for little children. They need something tangible, that's why we use
The little paper, no,
So they're triplicate for ones that we get printed, they need something in their hand, and then a paper copy goes home to the parent, a paper copy goes to the office for tracking, a paper copy goes to the teacher for their records. They're actually pretty affordable, that $500. I mean, I can't even
capable to take home to your savior can.
I love digital for everything, but at this age, they need tangible something. Digital means nothing.
I'll step out.
And I haven't raised that here.
Thank you. And maybe the number isn't so high because, again, looking at the positive behavior support and using that from a different point of view. 2052, general office supplies, high school. Those are office supplies as well as a positive school culture support initiatives that are kind of rolled into this category. And those supplies and activities are for students at the high school. So that's why it looked like the budget has doubled. Those are what we would consider, when the high school produced their budget, those are student activities. So I think they were called under their like school culture, or it might have been labeled as SEL activities by the high school principal. Do you see that, Mr. Funk, in your budget?
Yes.
Yep. So that's categorized in that. And those are used for a lot of the activities, right, that you do throughout the year for students.
I think several of those were combined, because I was looking for that figure, yes. So
Yep.
if there were a couple things combined throughout the year, then we do have general office supplies. We do have a general office supply, but it's not that near that amount. Correct. But yes,
Correct. If you take that number as well as those activities, and you put those together in that. And the reason, again, there's not an account code for those activities, so they needed to go to an appropriate area there. SEL, first day of school, what is this? Well, this is for the high school, and it's looking at activities, food, assembly, and a way to make that first day, right, a positive day for the students. Part of that overall school culture, a lot of good feedback, and we saw from our student reps from this year, trying to replicate that and continue to get some fresh ideas. Books for professional library. Sometimes we do use ebooks, but we look at some printed books, because if we can get a collection of books like we did for our administrative team, we reviewed Bold Moves for Schools. If we can get those, and what we can use is that collection and give them to another group to be able to use as well for book studies, action research, maybe again a professional library that we may have a need, and we want to be able to pull a resource to be able to explore a particular topic that may occur at that time.
Yeah, I think the only reason I suggested ebooks or some kind of source like that is because of how quickly maybe something might get outdated, and then how is that being kept up, if you're using it as professional development, if you're looking at resources and professional development, stuff like that, maybe it would be best spent to some kind of subscription to a kind of professional development, or like an online publication resource, as opposed to that everybody would be able to have access to, or looking into something like that, as opposed to purchasing a hardback book that then is going to, quickly become outdated.
one thing to just comment on that one, this year, I also had that budgeted, and when we had Collins writing, come in, he has a specific book for Collins writing, which does not have electronics or whatever.
Yeah.
The teacher said, I have that, so I bought a few copies to pass around. But no, I understand the whole electronic makes sense.
Yeah.
That was just an example of how kind of this year.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense too, like for certain things like that, where it is maybe a specific thing to go along with professional development, that makes sense.
Sometimes you're right. You can get a description or a subscription, but for $500, depending on the cost, you might not get a whole school-wide subscription because of cost. And sometimes it's good just to have a book, though, too.
Yeah.
To
No,
mark
I
it up and put my Post-its on.
Bookcases full of books,
Absolutely.
not opposed to books.
AP simulation. AP simulation prepares our students for the AP test, right? I think it provides mock scoring, practice assessments, and allows them to kind of have a lot of feedback. This is the time of the year where we continue to use that AP simulation as we prepare for AP testing coming up. EMT course, what does this expense cover? Harrisburg Area Community College has partnered with us in the past to provide a course for emergency medical technician, and we need an enrollment of approximately 12 students to be able to hold this class. I think we were able to hold it one time, and unfortunately this year's enrollment does not look like we'll be hosting it.
So this could potentially be an unused budgeted line item.
That's
depending
correct.
upon enrollment. Okay.
That's correct.
All right.
When we had the one time, did it cut across all 4 grades?
We opened it up to, I think it was juniors and seniors.
Okay.
And other very talented schools.
Okay,
We had ninth and 10th grade would have trouble getting into their schedule because of
okay.
school day. But yeah, we had that 1 year and had someone from West Perry come over also. But recently, we've not even been close to getting to 12.
Okay.
So when we open it up to other schools, do we charge a portion of the cost to them?
That 10,000 offsets just our students' tuition. I just divided however many kids. If we have 20 kids, the 10,000 is divided amongst 20 Susquenita kids. The other schools pay back directly whatever the cost is. So they're responsible for that, unfortunately.
Okay.
Laminator at the high school. The high school is going to get the elementary's laminator. There's still some life left in the laminator until there isn't, and then we'll get them a different laminator. So yes, that has been, the laminator has been eliminated. Well, they're getting a laminator. Yes. Lots of. Snow bucket, we have a Bobcat, and this is more of a flexible tool to be able to use for snow removal and equipment. So we have a piece of equipment right now, and having a snow bucket in 2319 line item will allow us to continue to use that piece of equipment for ongoing snow removal. A Ventrac with cab and mower deck, that has been in last year's budget and has been removed and is not in this year's budget. Game help with basketball, 11,200. Men's and women's basketball, along with 7th and 8th grade basketball. There's just a lot of basketball games, more than any other sport.
So how many people help with basketball?
Usually at a basketball game, there could be anywhere, I'll defer to.
Oh, there, that's Mr. Quick. He's like, give me a minute, I'm chewing. Sorry.
Book. There's the book, there's the clock.
Answering around my baby Ruth. Junior high, we have two, the clock operator and the book.
And the book. Okay.
At high school level, we have two at the tickets. I have a couple people working the door. We have a scorekeeper. We have an announcer. And then if I need security as much, it's usually 6 at the high school. Okay, so, and when you look at combined games, roughly between them 22 home games. We do not pay for PICO. That's, those tournaments, we bill the Perry County Athletic Directors Association. When we do sectional wrestling, that goes to PIAA. Wrestling, we have, again, the 6. I'm trying to think, do I have a 7th person at the table? It's usually 6 that way. There are some games that if I can't be there, then I have a game manager, and that's a little bit more because they run everything in my absence.
But that also includes the officials on the floor too, right?
No.
No, that's a whole different
It's a
line.
separate line. So this is just game staff, not officials.
Correct.
So great segue into the next question, which 2419 to 2427 team uniform needs. This is a great question right here because each team has a budget of roughly $1,200 except for football, and their budget's a little higher. Each separate line is addressing new uniform needs for football and a separate line addressing uniform needs of all other teams. Each uniform needs budgeting range from $1,500 to $8,000 with a separate line. So basically, as it stands, we've budgeted $6,500 or $65,000. So basically, when we went through, the uniform needs should be marked in certain categories. An example would be basketball, where it says $10,400 and it was marked in that line as uniform needs, should say and will say, and it does say now on the intuitive document, officials, because that is the charge for officials, not for the cost of uniform replacement. So it was an us when we were marking it up. So the numbers aren't changing, but what does change is, no, everybody doesn't get an additional whopping amount of money for uniforms. The only new uniform replacement this year is football, based on the cycle at this particular time. Now, there is a line item for $2,500 for miscellaneous equipment, such as compression shorts for field hockey and for cheerleading, socks for baseball, hats, visors. That almost like almost like those supplies that you have year after year.
And that's one of those things, it was never there before this year, because looking at the budget, knowing, again, my background was, baseball team gets hats every year. It was nowhere to be seen. So I don't know where, the money was there somewhere, but I don't know what it was put under. So every year, field hockey and soccer need socks. That's part of their uniform. Field hockey needs the compression shorts underneath their skirts. That's part of a uniform, and they're the things you don't, hey, turn them in and we'll use them again next year. We don't do that. So I tried to break out a separate line item for those particular things. So you can see that every year, this is going to be a recurring cost.
So, Mr. Quigley, what kind of things do you anticipate they're going to purchase out of the quote-unquote team budgets that each of the sports have?
And those numbers for each team, I actually reduced what was in there before. And the reason I did that was a couple of reasons. Being the baseball coach, when you need game balls every year. In our field, the way our infield chews up balls. So we have 20 home games between JV and varsity. We use approximately half dozen balls a game. A dozen game baseballs runs anywhere from $85 to $105. So with my old baseball budget, just getting game balls every year killed my budget. So I broke out all those game balls separately, and then so the $1,200 would be, hey, I need a new L screen, or we need things for in practice, things that have to be. Football is more expensive because I liken football to weddings. If you go to your florist and you say, I need flowers this weekend, well, great. Well, I need flowers for a wedding. We just tripled your price. Football, for some reasons, their equipment and everything is that much more expensive. So if you need, blocking dummies or individual single pads or whatever you need, they charge an arm and a leg, and there's no way around it. So by taking away, like field hockey, they don't have to buy socks anymore. I tried to make the equity thing all that way, that things you have to have every year. You have to have game balls. So basketball, hey, I'll get you 4 game balls. If you want more, that can come out of your $1,200 for practice, things like that. So that's why that's done. So those numbers all came down a little bit, but I added the other areas.
Nope, makes sense, thank you.
And one more thing I can add, the officials, they go up every year. And you would not, look at those numbers and that's all, you would not believe what officials make, and if you want to make nice bank, become a field hockey official. They're the most expensive ones, by far, yes.
Actually, we do need officials. The PIAA is recruiting officials, so that is great, and we do need substitute
right now,
teachers.
That's the thing too, is they got you between a rock and a hard place. They come to the league and say, we want this, and you can't play if you don't have them.
There you go, Dr. Jones, something for you to do.
To that end, they went on strike in Lackawanna County. They refused to go to games until they got paid more money by the school districts. So they all district whatever, they refused to go to games until the school boards gave them more money. So, so just so you guys were aware that it is an issue. And they were thinking about doing that in Luzerne County. I'm a PIAA basketball referee, but I don't do that. I don't hold out for more money like that. So don't get worried.
Well, it's good. That's a good fact for us to know. Thank you for sharing that, actually. The last question is, we're working to do our best to break down those categories the best we can. And we have some work to do in a couple of clarifying points here, and we'll continue to refine this work in progress. So at this time, is there any other additional questions you may have at this time pertaining to what you currently see? I'm excited for you to take a look at the intuitive functionality of that spreadsheet to be able to you can manipulate different columns by going through and breaking down the functions and objects, breaking down by school, breaking down by area. It's really kind of and again, Mr. Medina, thank you. Mr. Bard, thank you. Mrs. Matash, thank you. And Mrs. Balspa for all of your work. It's been really, I think, a really fascinating process to do and to work. And I've been blessed to work with a great team. And I do mean that. Go ahead, sir.
Dr. Fox, I'm sorry, and board members, I'm sorry, I failed to mention this. When you have the filters applied, or if you take all the filters off, you can always Control F to find certain word strings. So if all the filters are off in that, we'll call it the intuitive sheet, if all the filters are off and you do a Control F for STEM, you might find STEM listed 13 times, and you can tab your way through those particular things. Maybe that'll help you find certain things in a budget if you can't find a certain thing on a filter. So, oh, I'm sorry, 8.
I think for most people, their filters are off, you'll definitely get an F.
I just, yeah, leave it alone. I just had a couple things quickly. I wanted to personally just say thank you to Mrs. Walborn no, seriously, different ones of us have different talents and different strengths, and I think this is one of yours. Oh, I appreciate your critical eye and looking at that. It's really, I appreciate it a lot. Also, so I get, when you say we're going to work on these numbers or whatever, it appears to me that what the principals put down, once they get to the business office, at least the last 2 years, got turned into something that they didn't recognize anymore. Is that what you're talking about? And I don't know where that happens, if that's former business manager or how that was.
So from what they submit to the business office, and then what I think is nice that's going to happen is and I'll go back to the intuitive document, but honestly, we'll have a chance. They'll get a document as well that actually breaks down, and they'll know. And part of an internal control is it starts at all of our levels to know what's in a budget, what's been approved in a budget, what can be spent and what can be used. And that's the first line of any control that needs to happen. So I hope that answers your question. I think.
Like if they budget, say, for clocks, and then later it comes out as institutional mechanisms or something, and they're like, where are my clocks? That seems to happen.
Absolutely, and those are ongoing conversations that we'll have. And we have a tremendous amount of cabinet meetings. Well, I shouldn't say tremendous amount. We have a cabinet meeting per month. To them, it might be a tremendous amount. But we take a look at those as well. And I think it's a learning process for all of us, and it does involve communication. And it's okay to say, hey, that was approved, where is it? Yep.
My other comment, and I don't want to put the curriculum director on the spot, so I won't. But at some point, I would like, I think I was the one who suggested let's put some money in for curriculum, even though she's new, so there's money there. So I would like to, at some point, know what we're thinking as far as curriculum's concerned. Like, where is the most dire need? Like, the curriculum revision cycle, where are we? What are we going to start with? I know our world language texts are way out. So just a ballpark at some point. Like, these are, the immediate fixes and things we need to do. I would just be a little interested in that.
100% agree.
Dr. Fox, if I could, so board members generally know, and forgive me if I'm repeating something that you already know, the proposed budget and even the preliminary budget is a plan for next year, a general framework for what the spending may look like by the end of next year. The board does have the opportunity throughout the course of the year to do budget transfers from one category to another. So to answer your question specifically about the curriculum and instruction, typically at this point through a particular school year, school administrators would look at the budget and say, all right, well, we made it through snow plowing season. I can say that because Mr. Howe's not here. We made it through snow plowing season, and we have some money that was in that budget that we're not going to use, but the curriculum department could use a boost and get some iPads or software or something like that. And the board does have that opportunity at each board meeting to do a budget transfer from one category to another. So maybe that'll be helpful.
I was familiar with before I came here, so it'll be nice for us to be able to see that. We've asked for that.
Yeah, and the other item that Dr. Fox did address, I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in, that the administration or the cost center managers did submit budgets, and they do get changed because the business department this year, we were furiously recoding things to the new account numbers. So things did move from one category to another, and it was not our intent to be dismissive of any cost center manager's budget or be dismissive of any board member question or public question regarding the budget, because this is your budget. So I believe that as these changes are being made, even in the next month or so, when you get to next year, things will have much more rhyme and reason. So you'll be able to make valid comparisons from year to year in category to category. But still, you'll probably still want to do budget transfers at the appropriate time after the first 90 days of the month, first 90 days of the school year, and to more fine-tune your budget as you get into the first 6 and 8 months of next fiscal year. So I wanted to mention that.
And I just want to give one update. The Pennsylvania State Senate isn't back in session until the week of May 23rd. So we're not going to hear anything on the state budget until then, at least.
Thank you. I would like to thank our principals. I'd like to thank also Dr. Herman, Mr. Quigley, Mr. Howell, Ms. Snyder. I already thanked Mr. Baird and Mr. Medina, Mrs. Matash as well. A lot of work went in a short period of time. It wasn't an initial just, we're going to take our budget from fiscal year 22 and just roll it over. There was a lot of look into what is needed, what isn't, what is a new item. And I think that's represented in your budget planning docs. Any new item that may kind of pop out to you, to us, and why is that in there, and what impact does it have on the education? And I think that really speaks to us taking a look at it, and then us also taking a look at, while we put that in there, is there a substitute that's in there that's just as good as quality that we could get at a different pricing structure as well too. So they do an excellent job of that too. There's not a lot of padding in any of that, and they do an excellent job. So thank you, everybody, for that and your time. It's a good exercise for all of us. Additional questions at this time, or additional needs that you may have, or additional requests that we can move forward with?
This is more of a request for next year. So I know it was very difficult this year to kind of look at it because, as you had said earlier, it was comparing apples to tangerines. And so to really be able to look at that, and I think that's where, for me, the struggle is you couldn't really compare because you were trying to figure out, and I think that was to some of my point in looking at that, you were trying to figure out, like, as I'm breaking this down, what really is all into this so that I know what I'm looking at, next, from last fiscal year, this current fiscal year. So I think too, the one suggestion that I would give, kind of moving into next year would be is that as we get into this, maybe if for the administration is you guys know your budget best. And if there is something where you're requesting an increase, you guys do a great job in giving us, hey, here it's spelled out. Like I'm thinking specifically with the 3rd grade teaching supplies, that the foundations was built in there, but putting that right on the line item so that then as a reminder when we're looking at that's spelled out right there in that line item, hey, this is this big of an increase because of this. This is why I'm making this big of a jump. And it's spelled out right in there because it's going to save this type of questioning because that increase is spelled out right there. It's not going to be, me feeling like I'm nitpicking over every little thing because it's such a big increase over last fiscal year. And I forgot to look back and see that you did tell me here that it was an increase because of that. The other thing I would really like is, and I think Mr. Medina, you had done it, but I would like to see us continue to be able to get these monthly, I call them profit and loss statements. And it's really a revenue and expense statement to kind of see, how we are doing as a district. And I realize that that is going to vary from month to month, but to see where we are really at, because I think that gives us, as a board, a pulse of how we are doing and where we are spending, because then as we're looking at the budget going into next year, it gives us a really good sense of where are we spending our money, where should we be spending our money, maybe where we should spend or kind of look at, where those expenses typically are. So they're just suggestions. I don't like feeling like I'm the nitpicker that asks all the questions.
First of all, definitely not a nitpicker. The great questions, because I think a lot of it is great questions. And again, I'll go back to my email statement earlier, right? We can take a look at it and look at it and look at it, and boy, did we ever. I think the other day we spent 7.5 hours together. They know more about me now than they would ever want to. But nevertheless, it's a great point. The more information we can provide as to the why, we want to get that in your hands and be as transparent as possible. Absolutely. So if we could do that and it helps during that discussion, then absolutely.
Yeah, those reports will continue. Ken's going to show how to import the data. So you're going to see almost the exact same reports that you were seeing from him
Right.
that you were seeing continue when he's departed.
Great. I think that would be great.
So, and then the only other thing that I ask, and it's not important that it happens like immediately, but each one of these accounts, like if you go back to the one where we were talking about art supplies earlier, there should be a breakdown somewhere of what goes in there. And that, if we are able to give that out with the budget at some point, even if it's not next year, because I imagine that could be a monumental task, that would help new people coming on the board and new administrators coming on, which hopefully we don't have any, but if we would, that would tell them what would go in there, kind of like when Quiggs took over his job. He's trying to figure out what is supposed to be bought off that line. And I know Scott said that a couple times over the last 2 years. He wasn't sure what that account's even for. He told me twice he had an account that was like $80,000. He goes, I have no idea what goes in there. But they spend it every year.
Phil, are you talking about when you see breaking it down and using your example of art supplies, breaking it down as far down as like how many brushes and things of that nature? Or?
No, you don't need to go that far, but you
Okay.
can say, okay, this is for just a couple items that are in that category, just so there's kind of an idea. Because it could,
Okay.
art supplies was kind of a bad one, but like it could be like miscellaneous maintenance stuff.
Yeah.
Well, what gets charged to that? Because it's $80,000. The $80,000 is a lot for miscellaneous mechanical stuff. So I'm not saying you have to do it with every account, but maybe some of the ones that aren't quite as obvious.
If I may, I think if what you're asking, and I'm just wanted to rephrase this into, Ken Medina ease, because, I don't always get it. But I think what you're asking for is maybe a copy of the original cost center manager budget, because those original listings that we get from the cost center managers do have those breakdowns really broken down into like classroom and subject and STEM and high school English department textbooks or software or those type of things. So those things I think are the basic building blocks that we use when we put the budget.
So yeah, if you guys are getting that, then that's fine, and if that could just be shared with the board, it wouldn't necessarily have to be printed out and put in the books.
So-
but then that way, if we come up to a line number that we didn't know what it was, we had someplace, some digital form or something we could look out and see what goes into that.
Right, so when they prepare those for you, do they use the cost center codes that you use so you know which one it's going into, or?
Not yet, but we will in the future.
So I just,
And that way, everything's going
That
to
ma-
be streamlined. And they've been doing a great job. And I think it all kind of filters in, and then what we see is our exercise of where does this go? Well, in previous years, it went here. Unfortunately, there's not a category here, so we got to now, what went here is split this into two. And that's where we get into the question, okay, why did it go here, and what does that 8410 mean? And that's where we're at right now. That's a really great point.
Well, I think to Phil's point, it's like what gets coded to office supplies, what gets coded to classroom education supplies, what gets coded to art supplies. Like when you think of some of those like mid-level categories, how is that broken down so that the teachers then know if I'm ordering color copy paper, am I coding that and budgeting that into art supplies? Am I coding that into office supplies? Am I coding that into
Absolutely.
education classroom supplies? And that, to me, I think needs to be defined, so there's not that redundancy.
Agreed. And you know what I think is going to be fun? We could do a little workshop, honestly, on this as well, and just to kind of take us all through this prudent exercise, because I think it'll be good.
I would just say, at the same point, at the same point, I don't think anyone on the board, and I think it's important for the principals to hear this, I don't think anyone on the board is saying, when you say art supplies, we want to know how many crayons, we want to know how many boxes of fun. That would be ridiculous. I just think, we respect and trust your judgment. It's just knowing if you say I need $1,000 in art supplies, or that when the question's asked, that you all know that, oh, that's this, because I think that's that disconnect. But I don't think any of us are going to or want to micromanage how many pencils we buy or whatever.
And I think what I have provided for other school districts is I've created a tool to help with coding. And so when the cost center managers, because we all have to use the same chart of accounts, right? So what I've provided for the cost center managers is a basic Excel building block where you have drop-down lists and you select, is this for English class or math class? Is this a supply? Is this a paper? Is this for art? Is this for STEM? And by virtue of you selecting the various functions, it builds the account code for you, and then the cost center managers would assign a dollar amount and then a field for notes. This is a new item. This is $2,000 increase from the previous year. And that tool gets all the cost center managers in a particular district to use the same format, and it codes all the information into something that the business managers would then compile, and then the codes are the same when you're either coding it for dollars going in or trying to decode it to understand what is in that particular budget. So I can work on providing that tool. I'll provide a sample to Dr. Fox, and maybe that'll help for next year.
I can say that this was a pretty painless budget cycle this year. And on my 13-year tender, I did go back and look. We had 6 meetings one time for 19 hours. And we've come a long way. And some of the administrators are shaking their heads because they sat through those same 6 meetings as I did. And I think we've come a long way, and this was very easy to follow this year. And I think with a couple of suggestions that we gave you tonight would just make it that much easier for us. And it sounds like you're already doing some of the work. It's just how you're going to get it to us so we understand. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We didn't even have Marcy for those 19 hours.
Oh, we didn't. We would probably still be working on that budget.
I'm doing budget right now. We're doing budget and I'm doing my own budget. So I'm on the other side of this doing my own budget.
So is there any public comments? Oh, there's something in there, isn't there? Oh, no, that was the wrong thing. Should we look at Susquehanna's website, see if we can figure out what they want to talk about? All right, do we need adjournment? Oh, wait, but there's a backside. All right, motion, what? The meeting schedule. I have no idea what it is, so. May 3rd?
Next meeting, will be May 3rd, 2022 at 7 o'clock for our caucus. And then the following week, that following Tuesday, May 10th. Oh, good. I was going to say 12th, so thank you. May 10th is our next board meeting.
All right, any public comments?
You understand that I think May 3rd is the night that Susquenita will be beating Greenwood in track and field. So just saying, some of us may be a little late for that one.
Absolutely.
I move we adjourn.
All right.